evening, everyone, and to everyone watching on Zoom. My name is Christopher Scavage, the Director of Animal Advocacy and Legal and Government Relations for the Winnipeg Humane Society. And I'd like to welcome you all to the Winnipeg Humane Society's federal election debate on animal welfare. Okay. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that the Winnipeg Humane Society is on Treaty Number 1 territory, the traditional territory of Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and the homeland of the Red River Métis. We acknowledge that Winnipeg's water is sourced from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation. I'm going to start with a little bit of housekeeping before we begin the debate. We have some vegan cookies at the back for refreshments. Please help yourselves at any point in time that you feel the need throughout the proceedings. The bathrooms are at the back in behind that wall with the screen on it. So if anybody needs to use those, that's where they're located. And then the shelter is closed at the moment. So if you need to exit, we're going to ask you to go just straight out the doors right here and not walk through the shelter, please. So why are we here tonight? In an election cycle where trade, tariffs, and sovereignty are top of mind, animal welfare issues may not make headlines, but they too deeply affect our society. So it's wonderful to see how many people have come out today and tuned in online. This underscores that even in a federal election, Manitobans love and care about animals in our province and beyond. I'd like to introduce our moderator for today's debate, a well-known figure in the animal welfare space, Vicki Burns.
Thank you, Krista, and thank you for that nice welcome to me. I just want to say something a little bit personal, and that is, can you believe it's 31 years since I started to get involved with animal welfare because I became the executive director at the Winnipeg Humane Society. I just can't. And I'll tell you, when I started 31 years ago, we would have never dreamed to be able to have a debate like this, to have so many people concerned about so many issues about all animals. So this is really quite thrilling for me. And thank you to all of you who are here and who are on Zoom. So this election next Monday, which is on April 28th, it provides an opportunity for everybody in Manitoba and actually across Canada to consider animal welfare in their votes. And so we really appreciate having 3 candidates here tonight, who I'll introduce in just a moment, to be willing to explain to us what their party stands for. But just before I do that, I want to acknowledge Debbie Wall, who's with the Animal Protection Party of Canada. And Debbie, you're not as old as I am, but I think you've been involved almost as long. And I just want to thank Debbie. She's done so much and has so much courage and just stamina to keep going. So thank you. Now, before we start, I just want to explain to you what's going to happen. I believe that there are 7 questions, and each candidate will have a maximum of 2 minutes to respond to the question. And once all 3 have had their chance, then there'll be about a 5-minute opportunity for them to go back and forth with each other. And I'll ask you to make sure not to speak over each other, but judging by what I know of you so far, I think I don't need to ask you to be too polite. However, if there's any heckling, I'm going to be firm on that. No heckling allowed. Okay. So we're going to, and also I just want to mention that we aren't taking any questions during the actual debate, but all of you have the opportunity to speak to any of these candidates at the end if you have things that you want to talk to them about. And I'm just guessing that they'll be happy to talk with you. Yes. Okay. So I just want to introduce, first of all, Dennis Bayomi, who's representing the Green Party from Winnipeg West. Ian MacIntyre, who's representing the Liberal Party from Elmwood-Transcona. and Emily Clark, who's representing the NDP in Kildonan-St. Paul. So thank you very much to all of you for joining us tonight. So we're going to start with a basic question, a general question about animal welfare. We know that millions of Canadians care deeply about their companion animals, about how farm animals are treated, and about the amazing wildlife that we have in Canada. And they want to make sure that we are actually creating better legislation to better protect all the animals that humans interact with here in Canada, and to try and prevent them from experiencing any human-induced cruelty. So what we're asking you today, the first question is, please outline the key points in your party platform regarding animal welfare, including what your party will do to create a humane Canada for all animals. Dennis, we'll start with you this time.
Thanks, Vicki. Hello, everyone, and happy Earth Day. As you've heard, applause, I think, is warranted. I'm Dennis Bayomi, as you've heard, and proud to be the Green Party candidate for Winnipeg West. Before I go any further, a big thank you to the Winnipeg Humane Society and the organizers of this event, my fellow panelists, and of course, today's moderator, Vicki Burns. I'd also especially like to thank all of you here in the audience and watching online for your interest. I'm looking forward to an informative and no doubt lively debate. Now, the Green Party of Canada platform was released on Thursday with a separate section on animal welfare. You can read more about our platform or our party by going to our website, greenparty.ca. Of course, I had to get that plug in early. I'll talk about the other points later, but three that are especially notable in our animal welfare section are as follows, and I'll quote from them. First and foremost, recognize animals as sentient beings under Canadian law. Let me read that again. Recognize animals as sentient beings under Canadian law. That's in the Green Party of Canada's platform. I think we'd all agree with that. As a vegan for more than 30 years, since 1993, I feel the next two are equally, if not more important. And by the way, panel, don't worry, I won't bite. After all, I'm vegan. I couldn't avoid that either. Those two are promote plant-based eating in alignment with Canada's food guide, supporting public health and lowering the environmental impact of food production, and support farmers who wish to transition from animal agriculture to sustainable plant-based agriculture practices. These are especially significant given today is Earth Day, and I'll have more to add in the discussion later. Thank you.
My name is Ian MacIntyre. I'm a retired teacher in the Winnipeg-Transcona School Division, and proud to represent the Liberal Party here this evening, and proud to be in this building. It's makes my heart feel good because this is my charity of choice when I'm making my charitable donations on an annual basis. So I appreciate that. No federal party has done more for animal welfare than the Liberal Party of Canada. And in the last election, we committed to the banning of rhinoceros and elephant ivories, and we followed through on that. We've ended the testing of cosmetic testing on animals as well. So we've made big strides in those areas. This campaign, we are committed to strengthening and protecting people and domestic animals by clamping down on illegal wildlife trade at our borders, and to protect the lands that we know, love, and use for our travel, our camping, and our hunting. There are other things that we're going to be talking about in terms of conservation and other things and other areas, housing. but one of the more important things is that we champion nature conservation internationally in stopping the illegal trade of, thank you, across the border of any what they call the animals that hang on the wall, the trophy animals. So we're on the right track. Please take a look at our platform. And I am proud to be here with these wonderful people. And Vicki, thank you.
Thank you. And hi, everyone. Thanks for having me here tonight. My name is Emily Clark, and I'm the NDP candidate in Kildonan-St. Paul. I'm really happy to be here to celebrate Earth Day with all of you and to share some of my beliefs that I hold very close to my heart and some of the reasons why I'm very proud to be an NDP representative and candidate in this and other federal elections. So I believe, of course, that creating a humane Canada starts with recognizing animals as sentient beings, as was said by my colleague a little bit earlier. And they deserve protection in every environment that they exist within. So not just in our homes, but also in the natural environments that they live in. And the NDP will deliver real and enforceable action on this promise. First, we want to introduce a Canadian Animal Welfare Act, which will establish national standards for the treatment of animals, including wild animals, farmed animals, and companion animals. This has to move beyond the current patchwork of voluntary codes that give legal loopholes and make sure that we have legal weight to animal welfare protections, and applies to all industries. So this has to apply to agriculture, transport, research, and pet ownership, and be enforced by federal oversight. We'll talk a little bit later, but something close to my heart, also as a vegan, there's a couple of us here, and as something that we've all seen on the news in the last little while about the export of live horses for slaughter. This is something that I, as a person, absolutely oppose, and something that I'm proud to say that the NDP opposes as well. In addition, we'll create an Office of Animal Welfare Commissioner, making sure that we're monitoring and enforcing all of these regulations, and continue to support the federal ban on cosmetics and animal testing. Finally, we need to expand funding for wildlife protection and rehabilitation centers. We recognize Canada's incredible biodiversity and the fact that we need to really support climate change, the decrease in habitat loss due to climate change.
So this is Earth Day, and Emily, I appreciate your comments just now, but in the Green Party, we don't refer to it as climate change or the climate crisis. We're in a healthcare crisis, we have an affordability crisis, we have an international economic crisis, but we're in a full-fledged global climate emergency. And I'm going to use that later to kind of contextualize some of my responses to the other questions. But again, we're in a climate emergency, and this being Earth Day, you'll hear me say that a little bit more often this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. No, I think I'm going to have a hard time disagreeing with my colleagues on most of their positions on animal welfare. I think we're going to be very much aligned.
Yeah. Affordable, pet-friendly housing options for Manitobans and actually across Canada. And it seems to be right now, accessibility to pet-friendly housing continues to be an issue that really impacts the.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry, guys. Do you want me to repeat it all? No, I don't think so. Okay. The lack of housing options is really a big problem. And it's really, actually, any of us who've been involved with animal welfare for a long time, we totally understand, and there's research supporting it, that having a pet actually helps people in all kinds of ways, their own personal health, and their mental health and so on. So how would your party address the lack of affordable pet-friendly housing in Manitoba and across Canada? And how about if we start with you next, Ian?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. I also want to welcome our participants on Zoom. I forgot that. And thank you for attending this evening. It's great to see a good crowd here. I'm the papa of 2 fur babies. They're rescues, Vinnie Barbarino and Freddie Mercury. And so, and without them, I would be lost. And, you know, I've had pets throughout my life. And we've had pets when we were family, and when I lived with my parents, and we're lost when we lose a pet. And I have heard today twice from people I knock doors with, and you hear this quite often, that here I am, a senior, and I'm about to move into other housing, and they're not going to let me take my pet. It's huge concern to the fact that sometimes they decide not to go into the place that they really would benefit from. And so we need to change this. Carney government is going to build 500,000 homes a year, and we're looking at modular homes as well as seniors residences and apartment buildings. And one of the stipulations that we can make for that is that they be pet friendly. Now, we can't force the landlords after it's built and given to the landlord, but we can make that as a criteria coming from the feds.
30 seconds.
Coming from the feds, that is what we expect to happen in this building. And I'm very proud to say that there are now seniors homes in the Elmwood-Transcona area that do allow pets. And I'm very pleased that that has happened, and that will continue to happen. But don't take my pets, right? That's what it comes down to. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Ian. Emily, would you like to go next?
Yes, thank you. So I also am very lucky to have some fur babies of my own. And I'm grateful that I've been able to take some in that have come to my house because people have had to move. Their living situation has changed, and they were facing having to give up their little loves. And I'm in a position where I was able to take them in, but that's not the same for many people. And it is nothing short of heartbreaking to lose your companion animal. And that is something that I feel very strongly about. So for millions of Canadians, the right to have your companion animal with you is compromised by a lack of available and affordable housing. And we should not have to choose between a roof over our head and the animal that we love. So along with building 500,000 affordable non-market units, the NDP is also going to ensure that these federal build policies are incentivized to have pet-friendly units. Same idea, absolutely. We want to attach conditions to federal housing funds requiring public funding buildings include a certain percentage of pet-friendly units. And that will reduce pressure on shelters and also prevent unnecessary animal surrenders due to living situations. We want to expand the Canada Housing Benefit to better support low-income renters with pets. Includes working with provincial governments to ensure that people aren't evicted because of their pets, especially in the case of seniors, people living with disabilities, or people who are facing economic hardship. And then when there's people experiencing domestic violence, the idea that you could leave a domestic violence situation, but you might have to leave your pet behind. We want to make sure that we fund pet inclusive transitional housing and shelters, because when you're fleeing a dangerous situation, the last thing you want to do is leave behind that companion that you love so deeply. So between people, the bond between people and pets is something I feel very, very strongly about, and something that I will absolutely keep fighting for with whatever platform that I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Dennis.
And so again, the three of us agree that we really need to address this issue. And the first step really is to provide more affordable housing in general. We have a significant blueprint in our platform in the Green Party for creating more affordable housing in the country. And that starts on page 55 of our platform. So by default, with more housing, we'll see an increase in the number of affordable pet-friendly housing options, all things considered equal. Two key elements of our housing blueprint that might more directly address pet-friendly housing include number one, making housing a basic human right in Canadian federal law, and implementing a national renters bill of rights. And we feel that these are where we can put provisions to ensuring pet-friendly accommodations and allowances. In the Green Party, we like to look at upstream approaches to solving challenges. And one idea is to take this a step further and try to identify reasons for why pet friendliness isn't a default. And perhaps we could look at following the lead of countries like Mexico and develop a national humane education program that is helping children at their youngest ages learn about the importance of animals in our lives. This should mean that as they become adults, they'll be much less likely to fear or mistrust animals, and instead fully appreciate their profound importance in our lives and accept them fully as friends and neighbors. We'll talk more about humane education ideas later on. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Do any of you have comments further that you want to make or questions to the other? If not, I've got a comment.
Let's hear it.
Well, that is that many years ago when I was at the Humane Society and we were trying to push this, we got a lot of feedback from apartment owners and managers saying, what about the damage and this and that? Can any of you comment on what how your parties would deal with that question?
I think it's absolutely essential that when we're talking about the relationship between people and their companion animals and people and other people, we have to put well-being and empathy, love and kindness above profits. And the fact that a profit conversation enters into that equation when someone's well-being and their health and sometimes their life is at stake is a really difficult reality to accept. And so I think finding ways to ensure that people who do control that capital are incentivized to ensure that they're allowing pets into their homes is a good way to start, but the conversation needs to expand into a much more holistic and empathetic one rather than one that's just about profits.
Okay, thank you, Emily.
The accusatory the accusatory nature, like when you were talking about your question, in terms of, oh, well, you know, your animal, your dog or your cat has done this damage. And, you know, as a pet owner, yes, I have responsibilities but I do have rights as well. And one of my responsibilities is that it's not damaging other people's property. I don't want them to damage my property either. So we have to balance that. But I agree with you, Emily, that we have to take into consideration what the situation is for each person owning a pet. And if they're being subsidized either federally or provincially, then those kinds of things have to be taken into consideration. And it's not just about making the dollar. I agree with you. Yeah.
Dennis?
And I'll take this in another direction as well. We really can't neglect that there's a very real possibility of a prolonged downturn in our economy and potential recession, and how this will impact both residents and landlords. We need to address affordability and provide for a guaranteed basic income, a longtime pillar for the Green Party. Basic income ensures that those struggling to meet ends meet can receive a regular income and and live a life with dignity without the chronic stress of finding the means to pay basic expenses like rent, food, and utilities. And this is especially important for those with companion animals who may be forced to find less expensive housing. And I'll talk a bit more about basic income later as well. Thanks.
Can I just fist bump for the basic income?
Okay.
I like how you got that in there.
Okay. Okay.
Everyone saw it on Zoom.
Okay, we're going on to question number 3, and that's all about spay and neuter. And as probably I don't need to tell anybody here that spay and neuter is one of the most important tools that we have to try and decrease the overpopulation of companion animals. Unfortunately, the Winnipeg Humane Society and other organizations that are supporting remote and underserved communities, they continue to kind of have trouble meeting the demand. There's a lack of resources and many factors are currently impacting, all the shelters and rescues across the province. Can you explain how your party will support spay and neuter programs and remote veterinary care in underserved communities in Manitoba and throughout Canada? And we'll start with you, Emily.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So we know spay and neuter programs are essential to reducing overpopulation and improving animal health. But we know as activists in the animal welfare community that these shelters, our communities, our resources are just overwhelmed with the number of animals that they're receiving. The need is high and resources are stretched very, very thin. So that means that we need to create a fund. We need to create an animal health and outreach fund, and we need to dedicate resources to that. So that looks like $50 million annually in dedicated funding for supporting low-cost spay and neuter programs, remote veterinary clinics, and Indigenous-led animal health services. This fund will have to be available to shelters, to mobile clinics, and community organizations, and needs to be distributed according to need and geographic accessibility. Beyond that, we really need to support the expansion of mobile veterinary units in rural and underserved areas. These clinics have to be funded to reach remote communities regularly, and they need to work in partnership with local leadership and animal welfare groups. We can see right here that Winnipeg Humane Society's One Health model is proof that this works. So we need to invest and expand it nationwide. We need to address the critical shortage of veterinary staff that we have in our province. In northern Manitoba, we can launch a national veterinary service corps, which will include student debt forgiveness and bursaries for vet techs and veterinarians who serve minimum terms in underserved regions. We also need to fund training programs in Indigenous communities for Indigenous animal health workers to ensure that that there is culturally appropriate long-term solutions for those remote communities. Finally, we need to provide core funding to shelters and rescues, and we need to include wage subsidies, mental health supports, and burnout prevention for frontline workers who are working in animal welfare every single day. Thank
you. Okay, thank you, Emily. Shall we go on to you, Dennis?
Thanks, Vicki. Emily actually covered a number of things that I was going to mention, so I'll be very quick in that area, but without a doubt, this is highly necessary and badly needed. And although it's not mentioned specifically in the Green Party platform, I'm confident the party would support these ideas wholeheartedly. In the short term, begin with providing more funding for veterinary services, fund expansion of vet schools, provide incentives for youth to train as veterinarians so that they can return to their communities. But again, as the Green Party, we need to step back and look at the root causes and upstream solutions for this and ask, why do we have this challenge in the first place? We have to consult with the communities themselves and ensure that we're not foisting ideas on them, but rather it's the other way around, as it should be. But poverty likely plays a large part. There's very likely multi-generational trauma and cultural considerations, perhaps gaps in education. There's so much more that we could do to address possible root causes. And as part of reconciliation, we must do much better. One last thing I think I would mention is that, again, because of the climate emergency, sadly, this is going to lead to grave consequences for both wildlife and domestic animals, which often fall to the bottom of our survival priority lists. But the Green Party, with our proposed National Civil Defense Corps, is attempting to address this. So by all means, we need to increase funding as the Humane Society's recommended, but I think we really need to look at some of the root causes and consider in the current climate and economic context. Thank you.
Okay. Ian?
Thank you. I just want to take a few seconds to talk about the elephant that's not in the room this evening. We are not hearing from one of the major parties that's running in this election, and I think it's a disgrace that they will not provide commentators or someone to come and speak or debate. I cannot see how, if not coming to a debate and sharing concerns and answering questions, how they would represent you at the federal level. Having said that, we have to find the right role for the federal government to play in this. And, you know, I agree with, we're all center left. So, or left, right? And so we all agree on where the funding needs to go and what needs to be funded, but we need to find the right role for the federal government to play in this. And we can work with the provincial government in terms of funding many of those things. And I think the spay and neuter program, initiated by the Winnipeg Humane Society, has brought great value to Manitobans and to Manitoba's community. So when you look at the north, and right now they're facing a crisis in Thompson because it's either their veterinarian has left already or is soon to leave. So they're not going to have a veterinarian there. And so that's a very important piece that we need to look at in terms of recruiting, training, and making sure that we have enough. Now I'm going to speed up because she gave me the 30-second time. And we want to protect our vet companies, our independent vets, from being taken over by U.S. companies, which has been a move in the last little while as well. And that is pumping up the prices for regular treatments that we've been getting through our vets. We have to keep rates affordable. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Ian. Do any of you have any further comments on this subject? No. Okay, then I'm going to throw one in. I just want to let you know that a number of years ago when I was at the Humane Society, we were actually invited, myself and the veterinarian, to go and meet with a group of First Nation leaders in Quebec to talk about developing spay and neuter in their northern areas and so on. But one of the things that absolutely shocked me, I had no idea about it, and maybe all of you did know, that many, many years ago, maybe around 1950, the RCMP went and killed all the dogs in the northern area. I don't know why, but anyway, it was explained to us that this is why there was a lack of trust when people like myself and our vet went up. And anyway, I'm glad to see that that's not a problem anymore. It seems like lots of the northern communities are welcoming the Humane Society and others to come and help. But I think it's important to remember that history that's really not that long ago. It's kind of shocking.
I lived in northern Manitoba when they would do the culls, they would call them in the spring. And yeah, it was shameful. I don't even think the people of the community particularly wanted that, but RCMP saw a need, especially, you know, after a child was hurt or something like that, and they would call everything if you didn't have your pets leashed or locked up. So yeah, that was shameful, but I do agree. I think that there's better relationships now.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, thank you. We'll move on to question number 4. And that is that at the Winnipeg Airport, the James Armstrong Richardson International Airport, it's one of 3 Canadian airports that currently ship horses overseas for slaughter. And investigations have shown that the horse shipments from Canada frequently take much longer than legally they're allowed to. They exceed the 28-hour limit. Even that, 28 hours for a horse to be standing with no rest, no feed and water. I mean, and the stress of flying. I mean, the whole thing is very, very inhumane. Now, despite efforts by animal welfare organizations like the Winnipeg Humane Society and others across Canada to advocate for the passing of Bill C-355, which was the federal legislation banning this practice, the bill was left unpassed when the election was called. So if elected, will your party commit to immediately bringing forward government legislation banning the export of live horses for slaughter? And if your party is not willing to do that, can you tell us why not? Okay, so I think we'll start with you, Dennis.
Great, thanks, Vicki. 100% in favor, and I'm glad to say that our Green members of Parliament totally agreed and voted in favor of the bill. This has taken far too long and an example of how ineffective our system can really be. I'll note that we in the Provincial Green Party of Manitoba recently made this a policy which our membership overwhelmingly approved. Now, just a little bit of background. So this bill was sponsored by Tim Lewis, the Liberal MP for Kitchener-Conestoga, as private members Bill C-355. And in Mr. Lewis's words, this bill is grounded in science and facts. We have consulted experts and examined the conditions faced by horses during transportation. We have heard from veterinarians and other expert witnesses. The evidence supports the need for this legislation, and our duty as lawmakers is to make informed decisions based on empirical evidence. It passed in the House of Commons in May 2024 by a vote count of 181 to 137. Guess who the 137 were? Conservatives and Bloc Québécois, which actually kind of surprised me when I checked that. Yeah, they voted nay. And notably, Mr. Barlow, who spoke in opposition. I invite you to read the transcript online. But it was stalled in the Senate by conservatives who should be here somewhere today to explain this. Claims of negative impacts to Canadian breeders and producers and Indigenous communities and potential effects on international trade were offered as reasons for saying nay. And of course, with the January 2025 prorogation, things were shelved. So was the opposition afraid to touch this as it might lead to other animal welfare bills? Makes us wonder. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Ian?
I liked your use of nay. Very nice, very nice. I didn't miss that. Yeah. Absolutely. The Liberal Party supports the banning of live horse transfers for slaughter. The other part that you might have missed in the introduction was some of these animals are arriving dead in their crates, and there is no control on that end as to what happens and how the animal was slaughtered. And so there are a number of issues that have to be taken into consideration. And, we have Senator Charles Adler, we have MP Ben Carr, we have MP Tim Lewis, who advocate for the end of this and for just the banning of this. And if lucky, if elected, I shouldn't say lucky, I guess, but if elected next week, I will add my voice to that as well. The government is supportive of amendments, and it's unfortunate that the bill was stalled. And Dennis, you were saying at the when we first met that it went down to defeat 30 years ago as well by conservative vote. And so I think the Conservatives are very much on the record as to what they think about this. Unfortunately, they're not here to talk about. I already had my little complaint about that, but we are absolutely in favor of this, and we'll bring it back. And hopefully, I can be an added voice to that crowd. Thank you.
Emily?
Yes, absolutely, 100%. Absolutely, yes. We would immediately introduce and pass legislation banning the transfer of live horses for slaughter. There's no question about it. And I want to echo what my colleagues have said. I understand why the Conservative Party would not want to send a representative here today to sit here and answer this question, because it would be a very difficult question for them to answer. And so I understand why there's an empty seat next to the three of us here. I think that it's incredibly important to remember that we're talking about sentient beings. These are animals who feel pain, who suffer, who feel happiness and joy, and to confine anyone to an airplane, a cargo plane, for 30 hours in a standing position without food, without water is absolutely inhumane. And the idea that this is something that happens right here in Winnipeg is something that I know many of us really, really struggle with. Unfortunately, this is happening, and Canadians were outraged when they saw footage of it. Fortunately, footage was seen, and now we have public outcry. And this is the time that we can act. And when we can act on the banning of live horses for slaughter, we can certainly begin to act on how we treat other animals and other livestock as well. So this is an opportunity that we cannot let pass us by. We need to act right now. And I know that all three of us sitting here, whoever makes their way into the House of Commons, whether it's in the House of Commons or whether it's continuing to be outside with a loud and passionate voice, all of us will use our voices to ensure that we stand up for Bill C 355 or a similar piece of legislation.
Okay, thank you, Emily. Do any of you had any Dennis?
Because I'm by the podium, I'm so quick to put my hand up when that question is asked. Our election system really needs fixing. And there are two things that the Green Party feels very strongly about. One is we need to replace first past the post voting. Because look at what's happened with even this election. Most Canadians are not on the right of center, yet due to more parties in the center and the left, the Conservatives thrive on this split. Secondly, we need to remove the impact of money on elections. The current maximum is $1,750 in total donations federally, but even more troublesome, $5,000 provincially. There's one party more than any other that capitalizes on this, and they're not here today, as a hint. Thank you.
Okay, any other comment there?
Mr. Polyev talked today about if there's going to be any increases in taxes, there's going to be a referendum if he's elected prime minister. Well, if there was a referendum on banning horse transport, it would overwhelmingly be banned because a majority of Canadians are against it. And, you know, they should recognize that by the number of polls that have been done that say, we got to end this. It's inhumane.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. There are very few opportunities in a political career where you get the opportunity to pass a piece of legislation that has very close to universal support. And I think this is one of them. And I think it's very shameful that there is one party specifically who has blocked this legislation from passing.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to question number 5. And that's about Canada's approach to protecting farmed animals. And that we have some fairly notable gaps compared to other countries in that we're lacking really comprehensive federal laws. Most protections are at the provincial level, and many exempt what's called generally accepted farming practices, which is a massive loophole, even if they cause distress and suffering, as long as it's not what they call unnecessary suffering. Well, anyway, I could go on and on about that. The National Farm Animal Care Council, NFAC, produces codes of practice that outline minimum care standards for farmed animals, but they also are voluntary. And meaning that these guidelines, even if producers are not following it, there's no legal way to, confront that problem. And I just want to point out, in case you haven't noticed, Penelope the pig in that gestation stall, which is where female pigs from the age of 6 months on have to live their entire adult life. And that is legal here in Canada. They don't leave for exercise every day. They only leave to go to another farrowing crate the same size when they have their piglets. So, it's that kind of thing that other countries have banned. And it's about time that Canada does something a lot more extreme. So our question to you is, what is your party's position on farmed animal protection, and what steps will your party take to strengthen farm animal welfare laws in Canada to align with higher international standards. Okay, so I think, Ian, would you start?
Thank you very much. As we move forward and we reduce our reliance on the United States as a friend and as a partner, we need to reach out to other partners. We recognize that the federal laws around animal safety are not up to international standards. And so as we go beyond the United States as our partners, we are going to have to take a look at what are the expectations of exporting meats to other areas. And so that is going to force a change federally as well as provincially. Our international partners are not going to accept meat and meat products if we're not meeting their standards in their communities. And I think that's good for now. I might have some other things later. I want to hear you guys.
Emily?
So Canada's farmed animal rights are obviously very far behind, not just morally, but also internationally. What we're seeing is generally accepted in industrialized farming. Thank you so much. I was going to try to project, but then I realized I'm on camera. So what's generally accepted in industrial farming still means pain, fear, and lifelong confinement, again, for these sentient beings that we're here fighting for today. So we need to set up enforceable science-based standard for housing, transportation, and as long as we're continuing to produce meat for slaughter. These standards need to be developed in consultation with farmers, with veterinarians, and animal welfare experts, but they have to be legally binding and not voluntary, like the current standards that we see. Within a first mandate of an NDP government, we would absolutely ban the use of gestation crates for sows and phase out battery cages for laying hens. What a horrible life. These systems are outdated and they violate the most basic animal freedoms. We need to prohibit routine mutilations, things like tail docking and beak trimming, unless they're performed for a medical necessity and under some sort of anesthesia. We need to support farmers through this transition. We can't expect people to just up and change their entire lives. We need to launch a $300 million Humane Agricultural Innovation Fund that provides grants and training to shift to more humane, pasture-based, or enriched housing systems, which can support profitability and viability for long-term.
30 seconds.
We also need to provide the Canadian Food Inspection Agency with greater enforcement powers. They need to be able to go in and investigate without prior warning so that they can protect whistleblowers who report abuse on farms. And finally, we need to implement mandatory labeling for meat, dairy, and eggs so that consumers know where these animals were raised, how they were raised, and what kind of life they had so that we can make informed and ethical choices about our consumption.
Thank you, Emily. Dennis?
So we must do this as an absolute minimum, and we must go much further. In the immediate term, our platform recommends the following: create an independent ministry responsible for animal welfare and security, separate from agriculture and agri-food. Invest in improving farm animal housing and welfare. Establish national minimum standards for the humane sale, transport, and processing of farm animals, reducing maximum transportation times to 4 hours. And encourage provincial governments to repeal exceptions that diminish protections for certain animals. But evidence has been clear and mounting over the past decades that our food choices have a significant impact on our environment and on our health. So our medium-term proposals, as I mentioned earlier, from our platform include promoting plant-based eating in alignment with Canada's Food Guide, supporting public health, and lowering the environmental impact of food production. In supporting farmers who wish to transition from animal agriculture to sustainable plant-based agriculture practices. Yes, you did hear me say those two earlier today. So perhaps the question shouldn't be how can we treat farm animals more humanely, but why are we even eating them? More on this in a few minutes. Thank you.
Okay, do any of you have any further comments on this question? No? Oh, Dennis? Okay.
All right, so given it's Earth Day, and there's considerable evidence that animal agriculture has a significant impact on our environment, so what do we do about it? Well, according to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or IPCC, and the Oxford University's Program on Food Sustainability, livestock agriculture dramatically contributes to greenhouse gas production. It extensively uses water and land, contaminates and pollutes our natural resources, and results in a loss of habitat and biodiversity. And if that's not convincing enough, perhaps I can just read an excerpt from the lead editorial in the American Journal of Cardiology, the October 1st, 1990 issue, volume 66, page 896, by the longtime editor-in-chief, Dr. William Roberts. And I have copies in my briefcase in case you'd like one. Although we think we are one, and we act as if we are one, human beings are not natural carnivores. Again, this is from a cardiologist in 1990. When we kill animals to eat them, they end up killing us because their flesh, which contains cholesterol and saturated fat, was never intended for human beings who are natural herbivores. Again, a cardiologist in 1990. Volume 66, page 896, the October 1st, 1990 issue of the American Journal of Cardiology by William Roberts, in the medical school where I worked for some 30 years ago, or 30 years, some years ago. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dennis. Okay, we're going to go on to question 6, and I apologize. I jumped the gun when I pointed out Penelope and her crate, because that's what the next question is all about. It's about the use of intensive confinement in industrialized agriculture. And what that means is that there are hundreds and sometimes thousands of animals housed within a single area, limiting their ability to engage in natural behavior and basic freedoms and so on. It's very common in laying hens, pigs, and dairy cattle. And our hog industry, well, as I've already told you, most of the sows in, actually, I think half the sows that are still producing in Manitoba are in those gestation stalls. So we're asking you, will your party support initiatives or provide incentives to phase out these inhumane systems? Why or why not? And I think now we're on to you, Emily.
Thank you. And yes, I can probably, to the shock of no one at this point, say absolutely yes, that is something that I absolutely support. And I know that the NDP does as well. I might have also jumped the gun a little bit with some of my the pieces that I was speaking about in our last question, but banning the use of gestation crates and phasing out battery cages immediately is something that I think anyone with a heart and a conscience would be able to get behind. We've seen firsthand, secondhand videos, and maybe even been unfortunate enough to see in real life the impacts of commercial farming and what it has on animals and their well-being. And it's extremely difficult to see. It's extremely difficult to talk about, but it is much more difficult to turn a blind eye and leave it behind, because we're talking again about sentient beings that need us to advocate on their behalf. So we need to make sure that those people who are relying on these inhumane and outdated practices are given a path forward and a way out, so that we can continue to support farmers, but farmers need to support much more humane practices. And so that $300 million Humane Agricultural Innovation Fund needs to go into grants to promote training, shifting to more sustainable, humane farming practices, And much like my colleague over here, Dennis, is talking about the larger conversation about why we're seeing these problems in the first place, and do we really, as a planet, have the ability to continue to sustain this number of meat-eating humans? And is that something that we are willing to leverage our future, the future of our planet, and the well-being of the sentient beings that we share this earth with in order to protect? And I don't think that it is.
Okay. Thank you, Emily. Dennis, back to you.
Thanks, Vicki. So absolutely, these systems are reprehensible. We must phase them out and stop referring to them as barns, farms, and even agriculture. Buildings holding thousands upon thousands of animals are anything but, and should be referred to as what they truly are: intensive livestock operations. These are highly polluting mega businesses making huge demands on water and energy. They're completely unethical, considering that thousands and thousands of pigs and chickens in these factories are not allowed to go outside, breathe fresh air, and exhibit their natural behaviors. If anyone saw how these animals are treated, they would be appalled. Little wonder you'll never see windows in these buildings or in slaughterhouses, and why the meat, dairy, and egg industries lobby governments to implement so-called ag-gag laws to prevent investigations and reports of what actually go on in these places. I encourage you to take the time to learn about the food you eat and how it gets to your dinner plate, as I did 30 years ago. Read about the confinement systems that are used by the livestock industry and the inhumane treatment animals are exposed to. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Okay, Ian.
Thank you. I am personally not supportive of crates and boxes and barns and things that are keeping animals constricted in their lives. But we have a shared jurisdiction between the federal and the provincial governments, and so we have to look how we can best fit and work together to make changes there. Being a voice in Ottawa is going to be one of my better qualities. And I need to become aware, and I need to learn about these things. And I'm sitting here learning about many things this evening, and so that's a very positive thing. But we do have the animal cruelty laws, and we do have we have to make sure that we have those people out there and protect those people who are the whistleblowers, as you were saying before. Now, handling of animals while being moved is a very serious issue, and that's another piece where the federal government can work through Agriculture Canada with the provinces in order to make changes that are going to impact animals as well as those farms. We have to get those farmers online in agreement at some point. It would be much better than just instituting laws, because then that's going to be a problem there. But yes, we are in favor of initiatives and incentives to make sure that our animals are protected.
Do any of you have further comments about that?
I just wanted to comment on what Dennis said about encouraging folks to go and do some research and look into things. A lot of, I know the people in this room are probably very aware, but maybe we're reaching some people on Zoom who have not been exposed to the kind of cruelty that that animals are subjected to in some farming practices here in Canada. And I would like to encourage you as well to do that, because it goes beyond meat farming and it goes into any sort of animal byproduct production. And I think it's extremely important and has a significant impact on your outlook on life if you have an opportunity to go and take a look and get yourself informed. And so thank you to Dennis for bringing that up.
Okay, thank you. Since we have a tiny bit of extra time, I'm going to jump in and just say a couple of things. When I first started at the Humane Society, I was invited to learn about the hog industry, and it was after going into these barns and seeing these animals in crates and so on that I decided I'd better give up eating meat too. And I don't think we should call them farms. These are really animal factories. We still have some great farmers here who are looking after, who are raising animals in ways that respect their instincts and their natural behavior. And that's what we need to really be working on encouraging. Anyway, thank you all for your comments. Okay, we're going to the final question, which is Manitoba's spring bear hunt. Actually, I wonder if it started or is it about to start? April 28th. Okay. Some of you might not know about the spring bear hunt, but essentially the spring bear hunt targets bears that have just come out of hibernation. So they're pretty hungry and they're allowed to put barrels of food out and attract them. And really, it's not about hunting for food. Most of the spring bear hunt is about hunters who come from other jurisdictions who want to have trophies and so on. And it often involves, so that alone is kind of reprehensible to a lot of people. But the other thing is mother bears who have young cubs are at great risk because they do not bring their cubs with them to the bait station, and it's impossible to tell which are the mother bears and which are not. So unfortunately, every spring there are mother bears killed, not on purpose, but then their cubs are orphaned and many of them probably don't make it. So the Humane Society has realized that removing the ability to export trophy animals will make the hunt less attractive for sport and trophy hunters, because that really is what it's all about. It's not about hunting for subsistence for food. So could you tell us, would your party commit to federally banning the export of animal trophies? Why or why not? Dennis, we'll start with you.
So once again, I totally agree, 7 for 7. I've long felt that hunting animals is not a sport, and collecting so-called hunting trophies is quite simply barbaric. We need, as Mexico has, to implement a national humane education program so that youngsters do not grow up thinking that hunting for sport, in quotation marks, is acceptable behavior. By developing and introducing a national humane education initiative, we can help children at the youngest ages learn about the importance of respecting and valuing all living things in our natural environment. And as we've all suspected and have learned, the way we treat animals often leads to comparable treatment of fellow humans. It's particularly fitting that today is Earth Day. It's a good time to be reminded of the ancient understanding that all things are connected, interweaved, and interrelated. The Green Party wholeheartedly lives by this understanding. It is this understanding that will enable us to address the most challenging of challenges before us: the climate emergency, the health crisis, the new realities of our international relationships, the economy, and our compassion to one another, our fellow non-human animals, and to our natural environment. I've got a few seconds left on the clock, so I'd especially like to acknowledge one person in this room who's tirelessly given of herself advocating for the animals, and that's Debbie Wall. Among the many other things that Debbie's been busy with, Debbie's campaigning in Winnipeg Center for the Animal Protection Party of Canada. Be sure to talk to Debbie afterwards, and please give her your support no matter what political leaning you have. Thanks again to the organizers of this event, and I wish the best of luck to my fellow panelists. If you haven't already, be sure to vote. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you, Dennis. Ian?
The Liberal Party absolutely agrees with banning the export of animal trophies. It was a Liberal Party. It was a Liberal government that brought in the banning of rhinoceros and elephant tusks, and a Liberal government that passed the law prohibiting cosmetic testing on animals, and this would further be something that we would support. Now, I have great respect for hunters. My dad was a hunter. My brothers were hunters. I was not, but I gotta say, sorry, I like a good venison steak, but that's me. Elk. And but gun safety is an issue. Hunting for sport, I personally don't support that. I do not appreciate seeing those pictures flashed across the screen on our televisions of millionaires and billionaires posing with dead animals with their guns. And we should not be at all encouraging this or allowing this in Manitoba or in Canada. We will stop the wildlife trade across our border, the wildlife trade of trophies across our border if reelected. Thank you. Oh, and I will also say thank you to my colleagues. I really appreciate it. This was a great discussion. I thank you for the invitation. Thank you to Zoom. Thank you to the residents of Manitoba who are here today. Thank you, City TV. And I really appreciated this conversation. It was right up my alley. Thank you.
Emily?
Trophy hunting sends the message that animals only exist for our entertainment. And that is completely unacceptable. Full stop. We need to introduce legislation that bans the export of animal trophies from Canada. And that includes not only bears, but cougars, wolves, and other large mammals that are often killed just for sport. Just for sport. Because that's fun. I don't see how that could possibly be something that we could be on board with. We need to particularly target non-resident sport hunting, which is what is driving the trophy export industry. It's hunting that leaves cubs without their mothers. This isn't part of tradition. This is cruelty, plain and simple. We need to invest in wildlife conservation and in ecotourism, especially in rural and Indigenous communities, as sustainable economic alternatives that are non-consumptive forms of tourism. Photography, viewing, these can be profitable and much less destructive. We need to work with Indigenous communities to expand federal protected areas and wildlife corridors and ensure that habitat is protected and not fragmented by industry or agriculture, now or in the years to come. It's incredibly important for us to fund rehabilitation and sanctuary programs and to rehabilitate injured and orphaned wildlife and support community-based conservation led by Indigenous guardianship programs. I want to say thank you to my colleagues. This panel was spectacular. I'm very grateful to have been able to be here, and thank you to the Winnipeg Humane Society for the invitation. If you have not voted, I strongly encourage that you all get out and do so. We know this is an important election, and lives will be changed, hopefully for the better. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you to Dennis, Ian, and Emily. You all gave us some really wonderful answers. I think that we could support just about everything. And thank you so much for joining us in person and for people who are on Zoom. And I'd like to invite Krista to come up. She just has a few more words to share with you. So thanks so much.
Thanks very much, everyone. And I'd like to thank you, Vicki, for moderating. To all our candidates, thank you again. I know we've all said this, but what a fantastic debate. Thank you so much for coming out and sharing your perspectives and your party's positions with us. So, as Manitoba's leading and longest running animal welfare organization, the Winnipeg Humane Society prides ourselves on being a trusted, strong advocate for all animals and have played an active role in trying to improve the lives of animals in Winnipeg and across Manitoba. No matter the outcome on April 28th, we are committed to working alongside all levels of government to strengthen legislative protection and advance the welfare of Manitoba and Canada's animals. For those of you attending on Zoom, thank you so much. For those of you here in person, there are some refreshments to enjoy while you have further discussions amongst yourselves and with the candidates. We'd also encourage you to please stop by our animal welfare table to grab our one-pager that outlines the WHS's 5 areas of focus this election, which we talked about with the candidates tonight, and an exclusive election sticker. And to echo Emily and the other candidates, remember to vote on April 28th. Thank you so much.